If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Now, the Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Tuesday. Hope your work week's off to a good start. Appreciate you hanging out with us here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Got Jacob Beck and Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos. LSU baseball. What's the catcher spot look like? I wrote about it at LouisianaSports.net earlier today. We'll talk about it in 15 minutes. Glen West will be by to talk some hoops at 1:30. LSU, speaking of hoops, not shooting it great. And I actually dug into these numbers deeper than I wanted to, but it paints a pretty bleak picture and one that is a little staggering with the statistics. So I'll talk about that at 2 o'clock. Sharif Ishak at 2:30 talking about the latest with the New Orleans Saints coaching search. A lot of the New Orleans Saints media has converged on Mobile. Our guys have converged on Mobile in the morning. Jacob and T-Bob there yesterday and today. They'll be there the next 2 days, courtesy of LeBears, by the way. They're giving you some great content. They had Mason Taylor earlier today. I'm told Mike Kafka likely to be on the show tomorrow. So a lot going on in Mobile, and we'll talk about all that coming up with Sharif at the bottom of hour number 2. We'll start things off the same way we start every day with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's opening drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
What started with Aaron Glen has been pushed to the side, and then there was a couple of other names that the Saints dipped their toe in with Mike Kafka, and went down to Anthony Weaver in Miami, and then Joe Brady was very much rumored to be in the mix, and he said no, and Mike McCarthy became available, and there's some talk about whether or not that's viable, and the thoughts are that there's not a great start with that first interview, but there may be a second one, and now all of a sudden it feels like Kellen Moore's name is really rising toward the top of this New Orleans Saints coaching search. And so I felt like it was probably about time, since the Saints flew across the country to interview this guy in person, to discuss whether or not that would be a good decision. Kellen Moore is not a guy that I've spent a lot of time talking about on this show. He's kind of a new name to the mix. But he's very much in the same vein as Joe Brady, as a young, offensive-minded, quarterback-driven coach who has had some success calling plays in the NFL, specifically this year. Both guys had offenses in their respective conferences championship games. Kellen Moore's now got one in the Super Bowl. So what is the profile on Kellen Moore? Y'all know his background as a player, and that really is rooted in his immense success at Boise State, where he won more games than anybody in the history of college football. He broke Colt McCoy's record for wins there at Boise State. And he bounced around the NFL for a good amount of time for a fairly undersized quarterback with not a very strong arm and not a very good athlete. But he did hang around a while, and there's good reason for that. It's because he's a football guy. And if it wasn't indicated in his playing career that lasted probably longer than his skill set indicated it should have, it should speak volumes that he literally came off the sidelines with the helmet and shoulder pads on, put them on the ground, picked up a headset, and was immediately hired. He went from backup quarterback in Dallas to quarterback coach in Dallas. Literally went from facing the coach in the room with the quarterbacks to going to the front and facing the quarterbacks as the coach. That's how quickly that turnaround happened for Kellen Moore in Dallas. And he was put in charge early on. In 2020, which you're going back now 5 years of Kellen Moore calling plays. The Cowboys were a 6-10 football team that was not in the top 10 in any relevant offensive statistic. But I'm going to give Kellen Moore a pass for that season because Dak Prescott started 5 games, and then Andy Dalton started 9 games, and Garrett Gilbert started a game, and Ben DiNucci started a game. So you didn't finish in the top 10 in anything in 2020, but it was a weird season with all the COVID stuff, and you had injuries, and you started 4 different quarterbacks, 2 of which are not NFL quality quarterbacks. I don't really care what Kellen Moore did in 2020. But since then, it's been a really nice run of calling offenses for Kellen Moore. He was the play caller in 2021 for a 12-5 Dallas Cowboy football team. They had Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and Zeke Elliott and Tony Pollard and Amari Cooper was still on that team. They finished first in the NFL in touchdowns scored that year. They were 7th in the NFL in yards per carry rushing, which is very, very good. They were 3rd in the NFL in passing yards and 5th in the NFL in yards per attempt. That's a superb offense. More touchdowns than anybody in the league, won 12 games. That's really good work there from Kellen Moore. The next year in 2022, you had CeeDee Lamb and Tony Pollard and Zeke Elliott. Dalton Schultz emerged there as a tight end. You had to start Cooper Rush in 5 games that year when Dak Prescott went down. Dak was your starter, but Cooper Rush did play in 5 games. Still, the Cowboys, with a backup quarterback playing for a third of the season, were 3rd in the NFL in touchdowns, 8th in rushing yards. They had a good offense and won 12 football games. I would consider that a solid effort. Then they moved on from Kellen Moore, and Mike McCarthy assumed the play calling duties in Dallas, and he moved on to the Los Angeles, as it were, Chargers. I don't think that'll ever come out of my brain, but that's okay. He went on to the Chargers, and it did not go well. They had Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnson. They were 5-12. They were 25th in the NFL in touchdowns scored. They were 27th in yards per carry rushing. They did finish 9th in the NFL in passing, but only 21st in yards per attempt. Bad team. Played from behind a lot. Didn't produce as much on offense as probably the skill players would indicate you should have. That was not a great year for offense in LA. One reason or another, it just wasn't. So he moves on from there as Jim Harbaugh comes over to coach the Chargers, and he goes to Philly. And in Philly, this year, they're obviously in the Super Bowl. You're talking about a team you understand with Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. That's a really, really talented group. 7th in the NFL in touchdowns this year. They were 2nd in the NFL in rushing behind the best back in the league this year. 7th in yards per attempt passing the ball with Jalen Hurts. That's a good offense. They did a good job this year. So as I look back over the last 5 seasons, I would suggest that one of them was basically a wash in 2020 because you had ridiculous injuries in quarterback situations. I don't know how anyone could have reasonably held that together. But you look at the other 4, and 3 were really good, and 1 was not good. It's a pretty good run. And I would say this. Look at the quarterbacks he's won with. He's won with Dak Prescott. He's won with Cooper Rush. He's won with Jalen Hurts. Those are very different players. You had very much run-heavy offense with this Steelers group. With Dak, you're throwing it a little bit more. You had CeeDee Lamb on the outside. Now, look, Tony Pollard was a good player, and Zeke was on kind of the end there, but you had really good players on the outside with CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz and Amari Cooper, and that's a different model than what you would have had in other stops. So I feel like there's a little bit of better phrase this way. It's not like he's hitched his wagon to one guy and one coach, and that's the only way he can be successful. It's kind of the Eric Bieniemy argument, right? Like, okay, yeah, he did a good job with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. What'd you do elsewhere? Didn't do well in Washington. Didn't do well at UCLA. Like he hitched his wagon successfully to one guy. You could make that argument for Joe Brady right now. Well, he's doing well with Josh Allen. How'd that work in Carolina? With Kellen Moore, at least it's a couple different stops, a couple different quarterbacks, different circumstances, and solid results in 3 of the 4. I think from an X's and O perspective, from a play calling perspective, from an offensive innovation perspective, Kellen Moore's done a good job. That's really all I can vouch for. I don't know what kind of staff he could put together. I don't know how he would handle in-game stuff as a head coach. I don't know how he would run an organization as far as culture goes, as far as day-to-day stuff goes. I don't know how he is relating to players in the locker room. All that stuff is kind of beyond me. You would have to do a lot of asking around as the Saints brass as far as talking to people that he's worked with in the league. Thankfully, you don't have to make one location's worth of calls. You can call Dallas. You can call the Chargers. You can certainly call Philly. And there are going to be different people that have worked different places as far as players, player personnel. Like there are different references you can have here. And I can't, with any degree of confidence, speak to how Kellen Moore checks those boxes. He's young. He's run a good offense. I think that it is a feather in his cap that he immediately went from a player to a coach within the same organization. That tells me how much respect he had garnered from that group. And I think that there are some real positives there of the stuff that I can measure objectively. I simply don't know the other stuff. He did play for a while. That gives you a reasonable indication that he can relate to the player, having played a lot. But that's not always the biggest deal. All the players loved Sean Payton. It's not like he had a long, illustrious NFL career. So you never really know that until you know. I feel comfortable and confident saying Mike McCarthy knows how to come in, assemble a staff, and run a program. You know that. You don't know that with Kellen Moore. It's impossible to know. But I do like some of the characteristics of his resume this early on. And if you're the Saints and you're going floor versus ceiling here, which is a discussion we've had a ton, if you're going floor versus ceiling, the floor is really low here, but the ceiling could be exceptionally high. I think the floor is pretty high with Mike McCarthy. I don't know what the ceiling is after this many years of not really making a jump. But those are two very different discussions. And the Saints organization is in a very different place than the Dallas organization and the Philly organization. It's its own entity. And it's a hire that I'm certainly not here to criticize if they make it. Actually, I think I would probably be okay with it. But it is one that carries a substantial amount of risk if the Saints want to go in that direction. We'll continue to monitor this. I still feel like by the end of the day Friday, the Saints are going to have a head coach. I don't know that it's going to be Kellen Moore, but I feel like there's a real possibility of that. They can't officially announce him this week. They'll have to wait till after the Super Bowl for that. But you could get a report that, according to sources, that such and such has learned that the Saints are finalizing an agreement to land Kellen Moore as the franchise's next head coach. And you wouldn't get any tweets from the Saints but you would understand that that's kind of where things rested. We haven't gotten there yet. It's early in the week, and the Saints brass has a lot to deal with at this point. I know that the Saints are a punching bag for a lot right now. I made my case clear yesterday. I'm not in that mode right now of just absolutely hammering the Saints. Let's see the results of this thing. If it's Kellen Moore, we'll discuss that. I think there's reason to think that's a reasonable idea. So that's our Genesis opening drive here on this Tuesday. When we come back, let's talk a little bit of baseball here. What does the catcher position look like? If you read it at LouisianaSports.net this morning, you kind of already know. If you didn't, I'll tell you next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Audio Video Security Solutions, AVSSLA.com is that website, whether it's your surround sound, your home entertainment system where you're going to watch the games moving forward. Maybe it's an outdoor space where you want to have the electronic hookup there. You want to have a television in your outdoor area, whether it's an outdoor kitchen, pool. Maybe you just want to have it out there on the back patio where you spend some time as the spring weather comes on in. If that's the case, you're looking for that television or that sound system that's put in outside, Audio Video Security Solutions is happy to help you with that. The best thing about working with AVSS is you're working with a local company. You're dealing with people's cell phones in a lot of cases, including Mitchell Fisher's, which is 225-439-7920. Again, it's 225-439-7920. Give him a call. He's your point person. Great to have the owner of the company as the one you are working with to get your project done. If you're anywhere in our listening area, in and around Baton Rouge, Audio Video Security Solutions is happy to help you. You can find them on Instagram at AVSS_BR. It's Audio Video Security Solutions, AVSSLA.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
We'll talk to Glen West about a little hoops here in 15 minutes. Might get a baseball thought or two from Glen as well. Always talk to our guy from Go 24/7 on Tuesdays. Let's talk some baseball right now. I've got a position preview series that cranked up today on LouisianaSports.net. Every morning we'll preview a position over the next 10 days or so. And I started with catcher. I think that's a big spot here. It's obviously a starting point outside of pitching for the defensive in the scorebook, and I thought it was a good starting point for this series as well. You lose Alex Milazzo, you lose Hayden Travinski, you lose Brady Neal. Those three players have started the last 137 straight games for LSU at catcher. That is 2 full seasons. You have to go back to the Hattiesburg Regional to find a game that it wasn't started by Milazzo, Travinski, or Brady Neal behind the plate. That's a big deal. And LSU obviously was going to have to overhaul that entire position for this season, and they've done their best to do that. You bring in Luis Hernandez, a transfer from Indiana State. You bring in Blaze Priester, a transfer who was initially at LSU, then to Meridian Community College. You bring in Eddie Yaman, a transfer from Dayton, and you bring in Cade Arambidi, a star-studded freshman. It's my understanding that after the fall, Luis Hernandez had a slight lead at the catcher spot. Cade Arambidi was right behind him. Jay Johnson told the catchers entering the fall, we're focusing on defense here. Defense is the priority. And the players took that to heart. Now, the problem is you've got Luis Hernandez, who didn't really catch in 3 years at Indiana State. He appeared at 20 games at catcher in 2022, 1 in 2023, and 3 in 2024. So over the last 2 seasons, he's caught 4 times. You're talking about a guy in Blaze Priester who has caught at the junior college level but is a bat-first catcher. And you're talking about Cade Arambidi, who is a freshman and has never caught at this level. And I got to tell you, like, among the defensive positions, there's probably not a more difficult one to adjust to than catcher. You can go play left field. You can play left field in high school. You can probably play left field in college. You can play second base in high school and you're an elite level player. You can probably play second base. Catcher is a huge step up. One, you're not dealing with 86-mile-an-hour fastballs anymore and loopy breaking balls. 2, every guy on first and second base is the best player on that other team that was trying to steal every time. They will make you pay more than Joe High Schooler possibly can. So it's way more difficult to catch. You've got to be way more on your toes with the base runners. Any ball that skips away, those guys are going to get a good read. Like, it's just a very, very difficult defensive position to grow up and grow into. And Cade Arambidi's been catching his entire life, but this is a different animal. And I told you all yesterday, on Sunday, he struggled a little bit. He threw a ball into right field on a bunt, and he struggled to keep some wild pitches in front of him. So right now, Luis Hernandez is the leader by a little bit. What you know that you have is bat potential in these guys. Luis Hernandez had a OPS over 1,100 last year at Indiana State. He hit 23 home runs. He homered in the Lexington Regional. He doesn't walk a ton. He swings and misses a little bit. But if the power plays and he hits, let's say, take that 23 home run mark and kick it down to 14. Like, that's a good offensive season for a catcher if he gets a season's worth of at-bats. And that'd be a better offensive output than LSU had last year at the catcher position for sure. Because to be clear, Travinski did hit 16 home runs last year, but he didn't catch a ton. I'm looking it up. If you look at LSU last year at catcher, yeah. So Brady Neal hit like $140 in SEC play as a catcher, and Alex Milazzo for the season had 4 extra base hits. Travinski only caught 12 games. So the offense was pretty much non-existent for LSU at catcher last year. Milazzo hit for a far higher average than we could have thought, but he had 4 extra base hits. He bunted a lot. He was not an offensive force. He was better than we thought he was going to be, but far from a force. If Luis Hernandez hits 14 home runs in that spot, that's a big-time upgrade at the catcher spot. Brady Neal hit 9 home runs last year, and only 2 of them came in league play. 7 of them came against non-conference play, hit 2 at Rice, and that kind of deal. So, you're going to get an upgrade offensively if it's Hernandez doing a little bit less than what he did in Indiana State, or if Arambidi hits the way he's been hitting. Again, I told you, he hit 360 in the fall against SEC pitching. And on Sunday, he had 2 great at-bats against the back end of LSU's pitching staff. Aaron Beatty's 6'3". He's got a strong arm. He's quick. He's got bat speed. He feels like very much the catcher of the future for LSU. The question is, where's that future? Is it Hernandez's job for a year and then Aaron Beatty takes over as a sophomore? Is it Hernandez's job for half the year and then Aaron Beatty kind of catches up and Hernandez kicks over to DH? Or does Aaron Beatty just show up from the middle of February and hit like crazy and play good enough defense and he's your starting catcher for 3 years? That's kind of where I am with this position. And right now I think Luis Hernandez is likely the starter for now. And I think it's likely that you're going to see a lot of Hernandez and a lot of Aaron Beatty behind the plate the first 4 weeks of the season. I think you're going to see those guys do a lot of rotating. It's possible that Jay Johnson looks at some pitcher-to-catcher relationships as far as who wants to catch Cade Anderson and who wants to catch Chase Shores and what bat you need in there on Sunday and who needs a day. Like, there are multiple things that go into the catcher spot that don't necessarily go into right field. Catchers need a day off here and there, and catchers have to catch a pitcher. The right fielder just hits and goes and plays right field. So there are more factors in who your everyday catcher is going to be. But I think Hernandez is the guy at the beginning, and I think that Aaron Beatty is going to push and push and push, and we'll see just how much that tug-of-war moves. Priester has a huge power bat. He hit more home runs than anybody on the team in the fall. So that's a guy that Jay Johnson is going to want to get February and early March at bats to. I don't know how many of those come from the catcher spot. If LSU gets up 16-3 a couple of times, yep, I think Priester will come in there in the 6th or 7th inning and maybe catch a little bit and swing the bat once or twice. Yes, I think Blaze Priester absolutely warrants a look at the designated hitter spot here and there, maybe against good left-handers. You've got some guys with real bat potential. Hernandez has shown power in college ball. Aaron Beatty hit a ton in the fall, and Priester hit a ton in the fall as well. Defense has got to be the most important thing, and that is one of my chief concerns with this team. It's defense up the middle, with catcher being unsettled, with shortstop right now being unsettled, with second base and Dickinson not being. I'm not like completely doubting that, but I need to see it. And then I don't know who the center fielder is either. I mean, Stanfield can do it. Jake Brown's a really good athlete. Maybe Derek Curiel finds his way over there. Like, there are options at all these places, but none of it's settled, and that gives me some pause. What do you always hear about great defensive baseball teams? They're really good up the middle. They're good at catcher. They're good in the middle infield spots, and they're good in center field. And LSU right now can't say that definitively, and that's a concern of mine. I'm concerned about the fact that I don't know who the ace is. I'm concerned a little bit about where the power comes from. Catcher could alleviate that big time. They could solidify the defense and hit a bunch of home runs and be far more productive than LSU's catcher spot last year. I'm not. The point of this is not to tell you that I think that LSU is in a terrible spot defensively up the middle. The point is to tell you it's uncertain, and that gives me a little bit of pause. But there should be a lot of things that give me pause in late January. When the teams that don't have that are the outlier. Like 17, not a lot of question marks entering that year. Had like everybody was coming back. Lang, Poche, Dykeman, Papierski, Kramer, Cole Freeman. Like, you had everybody back. Bo Jordan. Like, and it was like, okay, I kind of know what they are. They need to go play. 23, you had superpowers. And those teams are phenomenal. And we hope that this team reaches those heights and plays for a national championship. But more often than not, especially in the transfer portal era, you're going to sit here in late January and early February, and even late February after they start playing, with some questions about this and that. You would hope the questions are like, who's the third starter and who's the DH? Like, those are good questions to have towards the back end. LSU's got more than that because there's a lot of turnover on this team. My concern level with catcher is like a 4. It's not an 8. It's like a 4, but it is a 4. It's not a 0. If you ask me if I could have Hernandez, Aaron Beatty, Priester, or I could take Michael Papierski one more year, I'll take Papierski. I know I'm getting 260. I know I'm getting 9-11 homers, and I know I'm getting pretty good defense. And I would take that. There's a little bit more volatility here. Maybe Hernandez and Aaron Beatty aren't ready to play defense. Maybe Hernandez's power from the Indiana State days doesn't translate to facing Texas A&M and Florida. Maybe Aaron Beatty's not ready. Maybe Pleaster can't be the defensive guy. There's a floor here that's lower than in some previous years with your catcher. Certainly last year you had guys coming back. You knew what you were going to get from Travinsky's pop and Milazzo's defense and scrappiness and leadership and ability to bunt and move the ball. And you hoped Brady Neal grew into a star, and that didn't end up happening. And he moved on to Tuscaloosa after hitting a $140 in league play. But I'm not overly concerned. I'm just telling you that there are some things that need to be worked out, and I'll continue to monitor that as time goes on here in preseason practice. That's part one of our baseball position series. You can find it on the homepage right now at louisianasports.net. Also got some cool news about Paul Skeens being on MLB 25 The Show. Got some news from the Senior Bowl, a hypothetical mock draft if Kellen Moore were the Saints' pick for head coach. Ross Jackson's got that from Mobile. So lots of cool stuff over there at louisianasports.net. We'll step aside when we come back. Glen West, senior writer at Go 24/7, talking Tigers next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com is the website. Every car that is on the lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. Maybe you're thinking about getting into the market for a new car, just thinking about it. But you're also in that process going, I don't really like going to dealerships. I don't like when I walk on the lot and I feel like I've kicked an anthill and there's people swarming all over the place and it's just a little bit of pressure. I don't want to deal with it. That's not going to be the case at Genesis of Baton Rouge. You walk in, you've got an amazing team of brand ambassadors that are happy to help you. You'll feel like a guest, not a customer. If you don't want to go to the dealership, that's understandable too. You don't have to. Go to the website, genesisofbatonrouge.com, and you can go ahead and start your shopping process there. They do digital delivery. They'll test drive remotely. They'll come to you. They'll come to your business. They'll come to your house. You get behind the wheel with one of their brand ambassadors. You drive it around. You can see what it's about. If you decide that's what you want, you can do an e-contract, digital delivery. That car's yours. You never set foot on the lot. I would recommend going to the lot. Airline at PQ, right there, across from Women's Hospital. But you never have to. That's part of being a shopper at Genesis of Baton Rouge. They're online at genesisofbatonrouge.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Every Tuesday, we chat with our guy, Glen West, senior writer at Go 24/7, all your team coverage, hoops, football, baseball. He's got you covered. Sonny and the gang over there with recruiting as well. Always a good time to check them out over at Go 24/7. Glen joins us on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Glen, how we doing?
Doing great, Hunt. I'm ready for some baseball. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to get in that mode.
You lie. You do know about me. You know exactly about me, and you know exactly how I feel about that. So we'll get there sooner or later. It's coming here in the next few weeks. We got basketball right now. Surprised LSU hung around in Tuscaloosa as long as they did?
I don't know. The surprise is the word. I think just kind of pleasant, maybe a pleasant surprise. I mean, I don't know that any of us had expectations that LSU would be able to keep this one pretty close going into it, but I thought they did a really nice job of taking the aggression and the hustle to Alabama in that first half in particular. I thought that LSU was really physical and was able to dive after loose balls. They were grabbing offensive rebounds out the wazoo. I mean, Corey Chess, you won't get a more passionate performance from a player than what you saw Corey Chess do, especially early in that game. But you kind of could see the writing on the wall as they were just not making shots, that it was just a matter of time before Alabama was going to create some separation, and they were finally able to do so in the final 5-6 minutes of that game. But still, I think it's something you can build on if you're LSU. I mean, this isn't a program that I think you ever want to see moral victories for, and but the fact of the matter is that they did not go into this game with very much expectations, and they were able to, at least for one game, show that they can compete with some of the top programs in the SEC. And now you got to try to string it together here against one of the more dominant teams that I've seen in the last several years of college basketball.
Yeah, we'll talk about Auburn here in a second because they're pretty salty. Can Trey'Dez Green help LSU?
I think so. I mean, it was only a 9-minute sample size, and he's only been with the program for 2 weeks. But if that's the effort we're going to get after him only being with the team for 2 weeks, he didn't look out of place. I mean, he wasn't getting, beat off the dribble a whole ton. He had one drive, I think, in the second half where he was beat off the dribble on the baseline and gave up a layup. But I mean, he was active, especially on the glass. I mean, he only had 9 minutes, but he had 3 rebounds in 9 minutes, and was able to extend some possessions. He actually got his hand on one long 3-point attempt and was able to kind of bat it out for a second chance opportunity and keep a drive alive. So look, I think he looks big out there, 6'7", 245. He should be able to throw his muscle around and help LSU on the boards, maybe around the rim. And then obviously that block shot that he was able to take coast to coast was just a little sample size of what he could potentially become if he were to stick with basketball and really put in the time. But I think it's going to be very interesting to see how his role grows over the next several weeks. But this team certainly could use that athleticism and that size as they go through the rest of their schedule.
This has been something I've picked up on since I dipped my toe back into the writing waters and have interviewed the players a little bit over the last year. Well, it's only been like 5-6 months, but the players don't take losses as hard as the fan base does. The football team was that way, and the basketball team certainly was early in the year covering them. Have you noticed anything different in the last couple of weeks now that the losses have started to stack up as far as the players go?
I really haven't. I mean, I'll kind of caution it by saying this. We don't really talk with the players outside of just after games. Yeah. And honestly, the last time we talked to one of the players was after a win against Arkansas a couple weeks ago. So, I don't know that much has changed in terms of how they take losses and all that stuff. I couldn't really speak to that, but I can say that I think that week off, that week in between games, between the one last Saturday and the one on Saturday against Alabama, you could tell they'd worked on some things, and they were a little bit more disciplined and a little more physical. And if that kind of stuff can carry on, can continue to build confidence, hopefully, with this team, then they should be able to get to at least compete in some of these games, especially down the stretch here. But I as far as how hard they take losses and things of that nature, I think if you're an athlete and if you compete at the level that they do, I'm sure they take most losses pretty hard, but you've got to come back and flush it and move on to the next.
The next is Auburn. We were talking yesterday, and you seem to think that Auburn looks pretty good on paper. What impressed you?
Yeah. Wild take there. That's a hot take for sure. No, I mean, I was just looking at all the stats, and I was texting with you and our other colleague, Matthew Bruni, last night. I'm like, this team just certainly doesn't seem to do anything wrong. I mean, you look at the stats and you're saying, oh, they're only 43rd in offensive rebounds in the country in terms of grabbing 11. Well, that's because they make most of their shots, and they don't really need to grab offensive rebounds when you're making most of your shots. So if LSU is able to kind of limit the second chance opportunities for Auburn, maybe they have a chance. If they're able to be physical with Auburn the way they were with Alabama, maybe they can hang around for a while and make this a sweaty game for the visiting Auburn Tigers. But this is a well-oiled machine that Bruce Pearl has coming into this game, and they've got talent out the wazoo. 6 players I think are averaging double digits in scoring, led by Johnny Broom, who I think is probably playing at the highest level of any player in the country right now. So it's a tall task for LSU tonight, or I should say Wednesday night. But they showed some things in that Alabama game that make you believe that they can hang around for a little bit, but at the end of the day, they got to make shots, and they got to be a little bit more efficient from three-point land if they want a real legit chance of staying in this game.
Jay Johnson, say anything on Friday that piqued your interest about practice starting up?
There's so much that he says throughout the press conferences that it's I'm trying to rack my brain here, but I think kind of the overarching takeaway that I have is that we might get a month into the season and still have no idea what some of these positions are going to look like in terms of outfield, starting pitching, catcher. I mean, I think they're going to be extremely diligent in those decisions by the time SEC play gets here. I think you're going to see every combination possible numerous times. And I think they have. I think this is one of the deeper teams that they've had on this roster. I don't know if it's the most talented, top-heavy, but they have a lot of talent on this team, and they have a lot of depth at a lot of positions. And so figuring out the pieces there in the outfield at catcher, certainly on the mound with the 8 guys they're going to be stretching out to be starters. There's a lot of things that I think we're going to be able to learn over the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season before our SEC play gets here. And that was something that I think Jay kind of messaged to the media in most of his answers is, we've got a lot of work to do in terms of figuring that stuff out, which is a good problem to have.
You have a early lean on a Friday night starter?
I like Cade Anderson, man. I mean, he was really good in the fall, and he's had a really nice start, here in the spring. I think Chase Shores, Connor Ware, all those guys will be, kind of given those opportunities to potentially be that Friday night guy. But, in terms of just what the first weekend looked like, I thought Anderson looked as composed and poised as any pitcher that was out there in his 3 innings. And so we'll see if he can continue to build on it and secure one of those spots. But I do think that there will be a lot of rotating in and out with these pitchers. And especially early in the season when you don't stretch them as much, you throw them 3 or 4 innings or you go 1 or 2 times through the order. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for other guys to certainly see what they look like in game-like situations.
Tell everybody what y'all got going on at Go 24/7 over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, we got a big junior day coming up this weekend. A lot of recruits from 2026 and 2027 will be on campus this weekend, and so we'll keep everybody in the loop of who's going to be in town. Obviously, we got baseball coming up. It's a big basketball weekend, not only just with Auburn coming to town on Wednesday, but you got Texas, I think, later this weekend as well. So there's going to be a lot to kind of cover over the next several weeks. They never seems to die down with LSU, which is a good thing for us. So yeah. Come hang out with us on the message boards and Hunt. We'll see you out there around baseball and basketball here over the next couple weeks.
Certainly will. I'll see you in the PMAC tomorrow. Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks, Hunt.
He's Glen West, senior writer over at Go 24/7. He mentioned that junior day that's coming up this weekend. The junior and sophomore classes in Louisiana are loaded. Loaded across the board, all kind of positions, all kind of players from all over the state. So it's really important for LSU to go and do the best they can to keep that fence around Louisiana. I know that a lot is made of the fact that the portal has become more of an emphasis, and spending your money there as opposed to high school kids seems like a more prudent play at this point, because high school kids tend to up and leave after a year or two if they don't immediately get to the field. But you still have to try to create that foundation in your program when you've got a state that's as fertile in recruiting as Louisiana is. I know that Brian Kelly's not taking any days off. I saw 2 pictures tweeted out over the last 24 hours of him in high schools all over the state of Louisiana. So he's been working it hard, and we'll see if they can continue to restock the shelves with really good players here in the state of Louisiana. All right, let's take a timeout. We'll come back and close out hour number 1 on this Tuesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com is the website. Jonathan Carbo and his team just do fantastic work. I told you the story last week about the conversation I had where they got a client to switch from one broker to the Highland Insurance Group because this is a commercial property owner that had 5 different locations, and all of them were on one general liability policy that was worth $1 million. Well, the Highland Insurance Group looked at that and said, well, you can do that a little bit more efficiently. And they put $1 million in each location, so $5 million total, for the same premium. It's that kind of expertise, that kind of flexibility, that kind of knowledge and understanding of the marketplace that separates the Highland Insurance Group from a lot of different insurance brokers out there. They're an independent brokerage. That means they've got relationships with dozens of different markets. They can put your business in the proper insurance position so that you're taken care of in the event that something goes wrong. That's what the insurance business is all about. And the Highland Insurance Group is here to help you. Trust them like you trust your attorney, like you trust your CPA. Trust your Highland Insurance broker. Give them a call or check them out online at HighlandIG.com. It's Jonathan Carbo and his team at HighlandIG.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Shout out to the boys in the morning, hanging out at the Reese's Senior Bowl in Mobile all week long. 2 shows down, 2 to go for Jake and T-Bob in Mobile. Practice just cranking up. I was reading a tweet from Ross Jackson, said that Mason Taylor just made a nice catch on a pass from Jalen Milroe, because of course that's how things work over there at the Reese's Senior Bowl. The travel over there and the shows all week long on our air are going to be brought to you by LeBear's Baton Rouge, and we certainly appreciate them for doing that. And the guys have had some incredible content. Already had Mason Taylor on yesterday. Talked with Ole Miss, former defensive lineman at Ole Miss, Walter Nolan. That's an interesting story of a guy that started at Texas A&M and went over to Ole Miss. And a lot of content's going to be coming your way on a lot of different angles from us down there at the Senior Bowl. You're going to have obviously the morning show guys each and every day from 7 to 10. You'll also have some great interviews that we're going to put up on YouTube, and then we're going to use some of that for LouisianaSports.net. Ross Jackson is there from LouisianaSports.net as well from a Saints angle. They had the opportunity to interview Mike Kafka today, so some of that content going to be coming your way. And apparently there's rumors afoot that Mike Kafka may be joining the boys on Off the Bench tomorrow morning, which would be fantastic as well. So if you're looking for some Senior Bowl, you're just looking for your football fix, looking for some Senior Bowl action, you can find that at LouisianaSports.net right here on our airwaves and, of course, on our YouTube channels as well. Got some cool news earlier today that I'll pass along from an LSU baseball perspective. MLB 25 The Show just released its cover, and on the cover, they went with the young guns. They went with Gunnar Henderson from the Orioles, who's phenomenal. They went with Elly De La Cruz, who is maybe as good an athlete as there is in Major League Baseball. And then they went with Pittsburgh Pirates Rookie of the Year and third place in the Cy Young All-Star Game starter, Paul Skeens, who adorns that cover as well. So it's three young players on the cover that made a huge impact in the sport last year. Of course, Skeens maybe chief among those based on what he did, becoming the first rookie to start the All-Star Games at Hideo Nomo in 1995, finishing third in the Cy Young. He's now the front runner in terms of the betting money to win the Cy Young this next year. And just another feather in the cap of LSU that continues this assault on the national headlines, and that's only going to grow here in the next coming weeks when Jaden Daniels gets named the NFL Rookie of the Year. It's just wild the amount of star power that this college, this town, this community, this athletic program has produced, and today was a really cool spot for Paul Skeens.
Yeah, and apparently with this new game, they're going to be giving you an option that there's a game mode in the show where you can start from like the minor leagues and work your way up. It's called Road to the Show. Anyway, they're going to be adding in colleges apparently because LSU's logo, I think, was seen in some of the stuff that they've released so far for the new game. So you'll be able to play it at LSU in your journey to making it to the MLB if you choose, of course.
So when they came out with that college baseball video game MVP at that very brief time, I mean, I'd have to go back and look what year it is. It was
like
somewhere,
09, I think.
No, it was right after 2000, because the players that were depicted were very clearly Ryan Patterson, Quinn Stewart, Ivan Nakarada, Nick Stavenall. Like, it was the smoke era team that had all those guys around 03, 04. But
they kept making it for a while, but the first one was in 2003.
Yeah, so it was right around there because I had that game. You could play at Miami. You could play at the Box. Man, I'm not sure what other college facilities they even had on that. I know Miami and I know Alec Box were there, or else you kind of played in like nondescript facilities. But I played that game so much, and like some of it was like completely wrong. Like I think Quinn Stewart may have hit left-handed or something on the game. It was not nearly as name, image, and likeness friendly as the NCAA game. It was just very clearly all the guys that you knew and the numbers and the states where they were from and the sizes and the speed profiles and all that kind of stuff. Like, it was a little bit off with all that. I mean, the Harris brothers may have been involved there, Clay and Will, but I can definitely tell you that Quinn Stewart, Ryan Patterson, and Nick Stavenall are like the best three hitters on the team, and I played that game all the time. I didn't play a lot of Major League Baseball games after Ken Griffey Jr. Presents Major League Baseball in '98, which was a game I played. I couldn't even ballpark the hours. Me and my buddy for like 4 summers straight played 11 a.m. to 4 a.m. almost every day. Like, it was just constant. We played multiple 162 game seasons as the Cubs. Of course, they were not the real Cubs. They were Mike Piazza, Frank Thomas, Tony Gwynn, Ken Griffey Jr., Barry Bonds, Chipper Jones, Ken Caminiti, A-Rod, Jeter, Kurt Schilling, Greg Maddux. Like, this is who we traded to the Cubs which was an option there. But it's really cool for Paul Skeens to be on the face of that. It's not necessarily his. I doubt he's much of a gamer, just like knowing a little bit about Paul Skeens, and I don't really think he cares that much about some of this stuff. It was evident when he gets announced as the rookie of the year, and like Livy goes nuts, and he's just kind of sitting there like, yeah, cool. Like he's just kind of steady like that. But it's a cool thing for him. It's a cool thing for LSU, and it's just another example of the profile of LSU being raised. And I'm confident that a lot of the coaches on LSU's campus are going to use some of the platform that these athletes that have moved on have created to show what's possible at LSU. Now, not everybody that comes in is at the talent level of some of these student athletes we're talking about, but some of the guys that LSU's recruiting are at the top of their class, and it shows that, like, hey, you can come here, you can compete for championships at just about all these sports, you can get massive NIL opportunities, you can be developed to go to the next level, and then once you get to the next level, you'll have the tools to excel at the next level. And Dylan got to the big leagues really quickly, and Skeens dominated in the big leagues, and we saw Angel Reese was awesome in her time in the WNBA, and we saw Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas set the NFL on fire. And like it continues to show that if you come here and you play for these coaches and you play against this competition and you use the resources at your disposal, then you can become something great. Jaden Daniels and Paul Skeens, and really even Angel Reese, were not nearly what they became at LSU, what they were in their first collegiate stops. And they're also, I think, endorsements of the transfer portal. I think there are probably a lot of LSU fans that would sit here and listen to me and say, I hate the transfer portal. It's terrible, ruining sports. Well, I kind of liked having Skeens and White, and I kind of like having Angel Reese, and I kind of like having Jaden Daniels. I kind of liked Joe Burrow being here. I think Luke Holman and Gage Jump were a nice add to last year's baseball team, and I'm kind of excited about what a couple of guys can do on this team. Maybe to you that doesn't justify it, and I understand you just think if you make a commitment somewhere, you need to stick it out and try to get a degree there and all that kind of stuff. I'm just saying from my perspective, as I always tell you, I'm kind of curious as to how it's going to affect LSU, and LSU's done a pretty good job in the transfer portal and has been helped far more than it's been massively hurt. So that's it for hour number one. We'll come back with a second hour here on a Tuesday edition of The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
One Bath and Closets. OneBathAndClosets.com is the website. David Duvall and his team, 30 years redesigning and remodeling bathrooms and closets. About 6:40 every night in the Palmer house. We send the kiddo to the bathtub. We use it. We got all kinds of monster trucks in there. We got bouncy balls in there. It's splashing. It's a disaster. It's a mess a lot of the time. So we use our tub. You may not use your tub ever. It may be a little bit older. It may be a little bit dingy. It may be taking up a lot of space. You don't ever take a bath. Well, then get rid of it. Get rid of the tub and put in a gorgeous walk-in glass shower. It's called a tub-to-shower conversion, and they do it at One Bath and Closets all the time. You can see pictures of their fantastic work at OneBathAndClosets.com and start the process of getting yours today. Go to the website, get the free consultation. That doesn't cost you anything. It's David Duvall and his team at One Bath and Closets. You can find them online at OneBathAndClosets.com.